इंडियन ऑयल, पहले इंडियन फिर ऑयल।
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, Monday night. This is your destination for news. Newsmakers' talking points. Our big talking point tonight, the ban on a BBC documentary on the 2002 Gujarat violence. Is that an overreaction by the Modi government or is it justified? Is the BBC documentary pushing a fake propaganda as the government alleges? We'll be dissecting and decoding that on the news today. But first, as always, it's time also for the 9 headlines at 9. A bar association unit outfit writes to Home Minister Amit Shah demanding a probe into what they call is an international conspiracy into the BBC Modi film. JNU cancels a screening, saying it could disturb peace. The Congress finds itself on the back foot after its MP Digvijay Singh asked the Modi government for proof of surgical strikes. Congress party distances itself from the remark, says it's Digvijay Singh's personal view.
So, Digvijay ji,
India celebrates the 129th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Memorial proposal dedicated to the freedom fighter in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, even as a political war over his legacy escalates. Law Minister Kiran Rijiju keeps the heat on the SC collegium system, says there is no public scrutiny on Indian judges once appointed, adds that the government-backed representatives won't interfere in the collegium. A big boost to the naval submarine fleet. Indian Navy commissions INS Wagir the Sand Shark, third submarine to be added in 24 months. A tech winter now comes to India as well after Microsoft, Amazon in the West, Wipro among several tech giants to slash their workforce by thousands. Next could be Spotify that could lay off 6% employees. Major cities in Pakistan go without electricity this morning after a national grid breakdown. Citizens outrage over the poor infrastructure. No bids from Chennai Super Kings and Gujarat Titans for the women's IPL. RCB, KKR, Rajasthan Royals and Sunrisers Hyderabad among the applicants. An Indian batter KL Rahul and actor Atiya Shetty tie the knot at a private ceremony in Lonavala. Pictures go viral on social media. But first tonight, the news that's breaking at this moment, there's been another fallout over the BBC's documentaries on Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Gujarat violence of 2002. Now the JNU administration has cancelled a screening that was planned of the controversial Modi documentary, saying it may disturb peace and harmony on the campus. The screening was set to be organized by the JNU Students' Union. Already, remember, the centre has issued clear instructions calling for the blackout of the documentary that looks back at the 2002 riots. BBC 2 had aired the documentary last week and it has stirred a strong reaction with different viewpoints being expressed across political party lines. So the Students' Union that had planned the film screening has been now warned that there can be no screening of that documentary. Now, all this controversy over this documentary signals just how the scars of 2002 continue to, in a way, divide the political class. With YouTube and Twitter links to the BBC film now banned by the Modi government, the opposition claims this is a form of censorship. Meanwhile, the centre has raised an alarm over the BBC documentary, calling it a motivated act against the Modi government and a propaganda film designed to tarnish India's image. Before we come to our talking point tonight, just take a look as to why this particular documentary has created such a stir.
A two-part BBC documentary on the Gujarat riots made 20 years after it took place has left the government of India fuming. The response to the film, which is critical of Narendra Modi's handling of the rights when he was the Chief Minister of the state, has been swift and stern. The government has exercised emergency powers vested in it under the Information Technology Rules 2021 to block the documentary on YouTube and Twitter. The rules allow the government to remove any content in the interest of India's sovereignty, security, ties foreign nations and to maintain law and order. While the BBC has not aired the documentary in India, but clips from the first episode were being uploaded by users on the social media platforms, many of which have now been removed. The opposition is crying censorship. TMC MP Derek O'Brien tweeted a message from Twitter flagging a clip from the film posted by him. Another TMC MP, Mahua Moitra, posted an archive link to circumvent the ban, a route taken by many others. The BJP, on the other hand, is crying conspiracy and accusing the British broadcaster of insulting the country's judiciary, which gave a clean chit to Prime Minister Modi.
In the last several years, the opposition and Congress in particular have tried to politicize the unfortunate Gujarat riots. But Prime Minister Modi stands vindicated in the Supreme Court and in the court of the people.
स्वीकार कर लिया कि जो उसमें दिखाया जा रहा है और बोला जा रहा है वो सत्य है। मैं पुनः उनको याद दिलाऊंगा, भारत के प्रधानमंत्री जी को, कि आपके लिए जो वाजपेयी जी ने बोला था, राजधर्म निभाओ, राजधर्म, सच से डरो मत।
Opposition leader Asaduddin Owaisi wondered if the government will impose a similar ban on a film being made on Mahatma Gandhi's assassin.
मोदी सरकार ने उस बीबीसी के इंटरव्यू को अंग्रेजों के बनाए हुए कानून के तहत इंडिया में, भारत में, यूट्यूब पर, ट्विटर पर इसको बैन लगा दिया।
The documentary by the national broadcaster of United Kingdom is embarrassing for the leadership of both UK and India at a time the two nations are in talk for a trade deal. India's Ministry of External Affairs has trashed the documentary as propaganda.
We have a High Commission, we have information to that video. Okay, so that is not being screened here. I am repeating again. We think it's a propaganda piece. Our assessment is a propaganda piece. Now, how can you say that? I'm saying it. We have seen it and I feel it's a propaganda piece. I don't know what's the perspective. You could say it's not aired here. True.
We need to go the extra mile.
Prime Minister Modi has found support in UK's Parliament. Lord Karan Billy Moria came out in support of the Indian Prime Minister, lavishing praise on him.
Today, Narendra Modi is one of the most powerful people on this planet as Prime Minister of India. Today, India has a presidency of the G20. Today, India has a vision in the next 25 years to be the second largest economy in the world with a GDP of $32 billion. The UK must be the closest and trusted friend of partner of India in the decades ahead.
Censorship is neither new to Indian government nor BBC. The BBC was expelled from India from 1970 to 1972 by the Congress government over negative portrayal of India. It was again expelled in 1975 due to emergency. With Aishwarya Paliwal, Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's raise the big questions. Is a ban on the BBC documentary on Gujarat 2002 an overreaction? Or is the BBC documentary guilty of pushing what the government says is a fake propaganda? Should the government rebut the documentary point by point instead of banning it? Is censorship a sign of weakness? Is Gujarat 2002 a closed chapter? These are some of the questions I'll raise. Ashok Sajanar is former diplomat. He, remember, is one of those who signed a petition calling for this documentary to be censored and banned. Professor Shruti Kapila is Professor of Indian History and Global Political Thought at the University of Cambridge. Shashi Shekhar Vempati is former CEO at Prasar Bharati. And Shadan Farasat is a Supreme Court senior advocate. Appreciate all of you joining us. I'm also going to go first to P. Sainath. senior journalist and Magsaysay Award winner who I spoke to earlier, because he has taken a very public stand against the government's decision. Sainath, you've come out very strongly against this government decision to censor this documentary. The government says it's a propaganda film peddling a discredited narrative, which is why they are censoring it, claiming it's pure propaganda. How do you respond? Is the government not entitled to censor something they believe is propaganda?
Firstly, Rajdeep, the question of whether the censorship is justified is itself unjustified. The government has not been able to show us that, when you call for restriction, you show that it is incitement to violence or incitement to hatred or full of lies, in which case you can tell us what those lies are, you can tell us what the thing is, and build some rationale for your action. But I'm saying, Rajdeep, that this takes away from the larger questions within which this whole thing is happening. If this is a question today at all, it's because the punishment has been handed out to the BBC, whose standing and clout in the world of media ensures it gets discussed at all. Rajdeep, much worse happens every single day to Indian journalists, but merits no discussion in a media which has descended largely to its lowest, most cowardly and craven point in its 200-year history. Indian governments have always been sensitive to criticism that emanates from the West, and the present one is landed in a dilemma. On the one hand, we've been telling the public that Mr. Modi has transformed India's image in the world. We can hold our heads high. On the other hand, when something critical of the Modi government emerges from the West, we have to call it a conspiracy. Look at this. Every single index, the UN Human Development Index, the COVID figures are a conspiracy. The UN Human Development Index rating us at 132 out of 188 nations, a conspiracy. The Global Hunger Index, you've said it in Parliament, it's a conspiracy, where we are 107 out of 121 out of 121 nations. The Environmental Performance Index, where we manage the fantastic score of 180 out of 180, is a conspiracy. And Rajdeep, for you and me, look at the World Press Freedom Index. You fell in the first year of the pandemic, in the 2020, to 142. Now we are 150. It seems that 180 nations of the world have no time for anything else but conspiracies against India.
Okay, that was P. Sainath speaking to me earlier. I'll come back to that later. But Ashok Sajanar, as someone who has signed a petition endorsing this decision to black out the film, claiming it's misguided propaganda, you heard P. Sainath saying all too quickly we call everything a conspiracy. Shouldn't the better option have been a point-by-point rebuttal? If the government of India has nothing to hide, if they believe that the documentary is fake, why not a point-by-point rebuttal instead of censoring a film? Censorship is seen as a sign of weakness across the world.
Rajdeep, I think as far as the rebuttal is concerned, it has been delivered. I think on several points it has been delivered. That, first of all, this film is factually inaccurate. It is propaganda because it does not even take on board the fact that the Supreme Court has dealt with the case, that the whole issue has been dealt with over the last 20 years. Special investigation team has been put in place in 2012 when the Modi government was not in power, and they have completely exonerated, the motivation. The malignant intent of the film is clear from the fact that, if it is, as the BBC so claims, that it is a rigorously researched documentary, it would have definitely taken on board as to what has happened. Now it has left this question hanging, thereby giving the impression, Rajdeep, that this whole issue has been there for the last 20 years and the courts of India have done nothing about it. And it falls into the responsibility of an organization like the BBC to come out and to dispense justice.
No, but are they not entitled to that? We can disagree. We can disagree with what you say are the motives of the BBC, but are they not entitled? We claim, as Sainath says, to be a Vishwa Guru.
No.
A Vishwa Guru is a
Rajdeep, don't misunderstand me. Let them be accurate with the facts. Let them be complete with the facts. When the burning in Godhra, the fire in Godhra takes place, they don't even say as to who is responsible for it. Even Jack Straw, in one of his, who's supposed to be the the fount of all wisdom that has come because of which all this has come through, he says it was an accident. Meaning, now if you are distorting facts in this manner, you are not presenting the complete information, then what is to be construed? You might not agree with me that it is a motivated propaganda because India is doing so well. Now this is not the forum to discuss Mr. P. Sainath's allegations, but I have responses to all of the charges he has made. And if you have the time to hear, I'll definitely be.
We'll come to them, because what really many want is a point-by-point rebuttal. And maybe there are shades of grey here. But Shruti Kapila, you want to respond to what you just heard. You were on BBC soon after the documentary was aired. You spoke about it and you've written a piece where you seem to suggest that this is not the way a democratic country responds. India, on the other hand, is saying, look, we are perfectly entitled to draw a line. If you put out a documentary which we believe is falsifying information about the Prime Minister, then we are entitled to black it out.
Thank you. First and foremost, just a point of clarification. In fact, as actually the BBC documentary, the first.
Unfortunately, your screen is. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I just wanted to make a point of clarification. In fact, that the BBC episode does actually state the fact.
Okay, we are having some problem with your line. We'll try and come back to you. You want to respond, Mr. Shadan Farasat? The government's view is, look, the Supreme Court has cleared the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has been cleared of any. Then a documentary comes which suggests that maybe there was involvement of the government. There's a huge question mark over that 27th February meeting where allegedly the government said that the police should not interfere when rioters are on the street. There is no evidence that such a meeting took place. That evidence has been dismissed in a court of law by an SIT. Why should the government of India therefore not respond strongly is the argument that Mr. Modi's supporters make.
See, I've had an opportunity to look at a documentary. I've seen the first part. I think one can have two views on whether you agree with it or not, but I personally didn't find anything which, you need to ban as such. And, the issue of Mr. Modi's role has been in the Indian politics for 20 years. So surely I'm a little actually surprised, even from a perspective of self-interest, why would a government do that? Because it only attracts more eyeballs to the issue. The more you ban, the more people are inquisitive, oh, what does it have, right? So that's number one. But I want to make a larger point about this. I think the challenge today, the government has used the emergency powers under the IT rules of 2021. I think it's very important to understand that government should never have the power to regulate or censor something. Be it the Press Council of India in the context of the textual press, or be it the censor board in the context of cinematographic.
But that's wishful thinking, Shadan. From the time of Indira Gandhi, and we can even go back earlier to Nehru, from time to time, governments do not like to be put under the have resorted to censorship. It's not something that started in 2014. You have state governments like Mamata Banerjee's who arrest a professor for a Facebook post.
I take your point fully, Rajdeep. I am in agreement with you that this is not just, specific to a political party. It's happened across the board. It happens even today. The point I'm making is this. I think it's important that there are independent, genuinely independent regulators for these kind of things. You can't leave these powers with the government, because what happens then is obviously the kind of bans we are seeing now. And just give one example. BBC has done this documentary. Possibly it does not even suit Rishi Sunak today. I mean, obviously we are Britain and India are in a negotiation over FTA. I'm sure Rishi Sunak, it's not in his interest to have this documentary come out. But because BBC is an independent broadcaster, right? It is capable of doing it. That's independence for you. So what we need is here independent regulation so that these kind of bans can't be done by the government. You need something genuinely independent. I take your point.
Right.
This has happened in the past. It happens not limited to one political party. And I think it should be cured across the board.
Okay,
I think we should take the larger, as opposed to just going to 2002 role, etc., which we've had for last 20 years. I want to make a larger point as to direct government regulation of free speech. That should not happen.
You made that point. You're saying that governments cannot censor. This should be left to an independent regulator.
Genuinely independent regulator.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, you want to respond? You've also written suggesting that it is the right step that has been taken. You cannot allow documentaries like this to, in your view, tarnish the image of the country unfairly.
Absolutely. I think, first of all, let me point out that it's a mischaracterization to call it a ban or censorship. This documentary was not aired in India. It was aired only in Britain. It has been made available through iPlayer only for citizens and people who are licensee holders who pay the television license fee in the UK. Whatever content you're seeing on YouTube or Twitter is pirated content. It is copyright protected. So to call it a ban or a censorship is fundamentally wrong.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, with due regard, the government has invoked emergency powers to get YouTube and Twitter to drop it. So, we are being disingenuous to suggest it's not censorship. It's a form of censorship.
Secondly, to your larger question on, should this kind of content be allowed or, is it right? I think the documentary has several holes in it. It is not an honest exercise. It is not a thorough exercise. It has cast aspersions on the highest court of India. And I think that is a very strong reason why the government has invoked these emergency powers, because you cannot have content of this nature jeopardize the relations between India and UK. And to also respond to your previous speaker's argument that, the BBC is independent, I think there's quite a bit of body of evidence there in the public domain on how the BBC collaborates with agencies of the state of the UK to put forth their state agenda. So I don't buy this argument that, BBC is some kind of an independent entity here.
Okay.
Also, we must not lose sight of what is happening in the UK, where the BBC is under tremendous pressure over its funding. So it has, started to look at a future which is beyond broadcasting.
So you see the BBC working to some malicious agenda. Whose agenda? Before I move on, whose agenda? Do you have any, are you saying that the BBC is working to someone's particular agenda? Why would the British government agenda be the BBC's agenda on this? Whose agenda?
Well, there are several questions that have been raised in recent months on the alleged political bias, the editorial bias within the BBC. So clearly the BBC is within the crosshairs of the domestic politics in UK. So I wouldn't, attribute to any one particular side there, but it's quite evident that whatever the BBC is doing is the outcome of the internal political turmoil in the UK, and that's what is manifesting here. And it's very unfortunate that they've tried to, make India the subject of, this domestic debate that's going on there.
So you're saying there could be, Shruti Kapila, respond to what you're hearing. The BBC's independent
thank you.
question.
Thank you. Very quickly, I think it is incredibly damaging for India's international image, the ban. Secondly, the banning something in this day and age is a fool's errand, because you're only going to give it a greater life, a greater immortality, than, as it were, letting it die, having a kind of like a live debate on these issues. Finally, actually, all the previous speakers are factually incorrect. The documentary does give a very prominent place to the Supreme Court judgment and the SIT judgment, which exonerates the Prime Minister. Plus, you have votaries of the BJP as well as spokesperson for Prime Minister Modi defending his position. In fact, the final word goes to Swapan Das Gupta, who's demanding a closure on these events. So all of that this is actually propaganda. This is misrepresentation of what actually the film is showing. But I actually think more than any of this kind of hullabaloo, the problem is really what India's image today might be. Its greatest asset is in terms of its soft power, is that it's a multicultural liberal democracy. With the Ukraine war, all those principles have come up very front and center in the geopolitical arena. This just looks very bad, but it also makes Prime Minister Modi more authoritarian authoritarian, lessen control even of his own people, that he needs to do these draconian measures which are actually associated with China.
So you're saying this documentary, banning a documentary or being seen to censor it makes the Indian government look bad internationally. You want to respond as a former diplomat, Mr. Sajadar, that the last thing you want is to be seen to be a country that resorts to bans and censorship. If, as I come back to it, if governments have nothing to hide, you know, why do provide free advertising in a way? It's paid advertising almost for the documentary by banning it. That's the worst thing to do. Just allow it to go, let people judge, let people criticize it, rebut what has been said.
Rajdeep, I think what we really need to do is we need to move forward. I think we've really shackled ourselves by discussing this issue for the last 20 years. There has been a closure. We need to get a closure to all of this. You know, there is also, in addition to, you know, the image of the country, the high profile of the country. And I will say that the image of the country has really gone up leaps and bounds over the last few years, you know, whether it is India's economic growth, whether it is G20 presidency, but not going into all of that. You know, there's another reason that has been cited, it has not been quoted on your program, that there was a genuine potential danger of, you know, public order being disturbed, because this being used, because this is again trying to further you know, in terms of incite.
But there is very little that this documentary, as someone who has covered the Gujarat riots more than any of those, in fact, who are seen in the documentary who are not on the ground, there is very little that is not known. To my mind, barring the fact that the Foreign Office of Britain has endorsed it, all of this was known in the public domain. I have openly said, I believe the 27th February meeting, let me be clear, never gave the police the instructions that were claimed by many people anti-Modi. I have been very clear of that. And so have others in this video. So why fear a BBC documentary when many of us have said this for years?
This is no fear, Rajdeep. I think this is basically, we don't want to sort of, you know, continue to discuss all that, because if you are trying to pit the BBC documentary against the Supreme Court verdict, I think you are doing grave injustice to your own judiciary, to your own legal system. The other aspect, you know, when you're talking about the independence of the BBC, let's also see after 20 years, you know, one report from the Foreign Office is slyly handed over to the BBC to do this documentary, the so-called documentary. Meaning, how can you say that it is an independent organization?
Okay, so you're saying you're again going by the conspiracy theory, but you know, all the critics in a way, it's a closed chapter. Once the Supreme Court, based on an SIT report, gave Prime Minister Modi a clean chit, why revive 2002 at all?
No, absolutely. And you see the last point.
Let him respond.
Okay, sure.
See, a court will decide something and there will be legal consequences for that. Fair enough. So the legal consequences have or have not flown. But is there any law, even in India, that once a Supreme Court decides a matter, it ceases to be up for discussion? Every day we have articles in newspapers saying Supreme Court got this wrong, this right, in terms of after the final decision has come. So where is the question that because Supreme Court has taken a view on a certain aspect of that fact, not even that's on a personal culpability, may have taken a certain view, may not actually, it doesn't even go into that detail, but whatever it is, it doesn't cease to be up for discussion. I think that understanding, I don't know where my friends on the panel are getting that understanding from. Even as per our own law, that understanding does not exist. I'm sorry. Therefore, I'm a little surprised. And I think one thing the government can still do, the second part of this documentary is coming tomorrow, 24th. I mean, none of us have seen it. But I think it'll be good that they don't sort of try and, you know, bar that. That will be at least maybe they, as a hush, you know, as a quick response, they try to, you know, do this. I don't think it helps them. They should actually allow the second one to come through.
Shashi Shekhar Vempati, does it help governments? Would a better attitude, I say from the start, be a point-by-point rebuttal? Take the battle into the BBC's court rather than just a blanket ban which only gives more coverage, more publicity to this documentary, increases the curiosity.
See, first of all, I think this issue has been debated over and over for the last 2 decades. Several elections have already judged Mr. Modi's record, be it as Chief Minister of Gujarat or as Prime Minister of India. And finally, of course, the Supreme Court has, you know, opined on it. So at some point, you have to put an end to it because you have to heal the wounds. I mean, you were talking of the scars of Gujarat right at the beginning. I think it was perhaps Sainath or you, I don't recall. So you have to heal. And how will the healing happen if you're going to reopen the wounds and then raise doubt and cast aspersions? I don't buy this argument that, the documentary was, gave a fair coverage to the Supreme Court judgment. Because if you look at the documentary, you have people like Christophe Jaffrelot, calling it a superficial investigation and dismissing the entire exercise. I mean, that is, to me, it looks like the entire purpose of this documentary was to reopen the wounds and poke holes in the entire exercise and keep the debate going. I think that is what is problematic, not, is the Supreme Court up for debate or not?
You're saying that the documentary seems to only reopen old wounds. Shruti Kapila, a final word on that, because there will be those who will say, look, there were Hindus also who were killed, Hindu rioters also killed by the police in firing. A fact that the documentary doesn't seem to spend enough time on. There will be those who will nitpick on a particular individual being given a space on it who's seen as anti-Modi. Given all that, do you believe that this documentary is a fair representation? Should it be seen as journalism of the highest order, or should it be seen as the Modi government seems to see it as propaganda?
Let me just say what marks this documentary out is that it is precisely authoritative. It is authoritative because it has come on the state broadcaster based on an official government report, as opposed to, as it were, civil society action or even indeed human rights actions, on which, as you say, this kind of material has been circulating in the world for 20 years. Secondly, if India really thinks it is a robust liberal democracy, it should show and act in that manner. At this point, it doesn't look like that because debate, dissension, and actually critical debate over controversial issues is really the touchstone of a true democracy. In banning it, I think it degrades both the Prime Minister's office, his own personal reputation as a world leader, Vishwaguru, but also India's reputation at a time which is an important time in world affairs, as the shape of the world is shifting, and India needs to sort of think about where its, as it were, political ideals and international, as it were, commitments lie, in what sort of principles it wants to stand behind.
Okay,
so quite apart from the details of of who did what to whom when, those are matters of India's politics, which indeed, as you and others have pointed out, are debated, and people, of course, vote on them periodically. But this is actually really shows India's weakness, and actually it costs India, as well as the Prime Minister, his reputation.
One more time, Mr. Sajjanar. Governments usually that are seen to be authoritarian and autocratic are the ones that resort to censorship bans. Governments that are seen to be open are willing to take criticism on the cheek and willing, do you agree with Shruti Kapila, in a year that we have the G20 presidency, do we really need all of this? Do we really need to? We could have ignored the documentary, allowed it to go ahead.
First of all, I don't agree with Shruti Kapila at all. Second is, I don't think fine, as I mentioned, as far as the image and profile is concerned, that's important, but it's also important to maintain law and order in the country. And we have seen how motivated misreporting on certain issues in the recent past has led to communal violence and communal tension in the country. This also, in government's view, had the potential of doing that. And that is why the government has taken this particular decision.
Quick response to what you heard, Mr. Farasat, that this could have led to a law and order. This could have led to a law and order situation.
Yeah, I think public order and law and order is the most touted, excuse. I'm not just saying about this issue, but generally. But the good thing is that never ever, whenever these movies are banned, and the court uplifts them in many cases, when the movies are shown, there's never a law and order issue actually. So this is a description, like you said, Rajiv, we have seen this. Why do we need a BBC? We have seen this on our channels for 15, 20 years. Each one, Indians will have view on this, one way or the other. Fair enough, no difficulty. You can have two different views. Where is the question of banning this?
Okay.
There's nothing new to us.
Let me, in a way, as we've heard these voices, go back to what I asked Mr. Sainath, because Mr. Sainath says that this is an example of a declining press freedom and a growing sense of authoritarianism across the country. As I said, many believe that the government believes this is a discredited narrative, and they are using existing laws to try and ensure that it doesn't result in law and order trouble. How did Mr. Sainath respond to the fact that there are many who are questioning these indexes, Sainath? World Press Freedom Index, authoritarian regimes are higher than India. What does that say? Should we be looking at that really? Is this an issue of press freedom really?
If it's a discredited narrative, already discredited, why are they worried about it? What harm can it do if it's already discredited? But I say again, much worse. And by the way, your point about they're challenging the indexes, of course they're challenging the indexes, and the media are giving them op-ed and edit page space to make absolutely vapid and moronic comments about of every index is open to question. The World Press Freedom Index, and I'll come back to that in a minute, Rajdeep, because I was personally involved in the government's effort to rebut that index. But anyway, just look at what's happening overall. What discredited narrative was there behind the scores of FIRs, nearly 100 in the last 2-3 years, against journalists, against the imposing of censorship, against journalists in this country jailed for up to 2 years without being produced in a court. An entire state, Kashmir, now Union Territory, suffering net blackout for months at a time. Which discredited narrative led to that? Over 3,000 journalists retrenched, laid off, or otherwise thrown out of their jobs, despite Mr. Modi declaring them an essential service on March 24, 2020. How many filmmakers have been bullied, browbeaten, blackmailed, or coerced? Why does the PMO, if they want to blow apart this discredited narrative, why does not the PMO hold a press conference and do so? Despite having brought the dominant Indian media to heel in the last few years, the Prime Minister has a record of being the only leader of a democratic nation that does not hold press conferences. He held one. In 2019, he held one and never answered a single question, leaving that to Mr. Shah. He did not come on to a single issue of controversy. He did not answer any questions. And this was called a press conference. Why don't you do this? I read today in the newspaper that Prime Minister Modi says that we should do away with colonial era laws. No government has used them more extensively than his. In fact, just look at the fact that I would be thrilled if we did away with the laws of sedition, etc. In fact, they have brought in new provisions, new laws, new provisions to old laws like the Epidemic and Diseases Act, under which Samuel Raja Pandian was arrested in Tamil Nadu, the editor of the portal Simplicity in Coimbatore. You know, Rajdeep, when the last journalist was arrested and prosecuted under that law? Bal Gangadhar Tilak in the late 1890s. Now, after arresting Pandian, a few months later, the government brings an amendment not to do away with the colonial harshness of the Epidemic Diseases Act, but to make it more stringent and more powerful. You know, so please don't tell me this about discredited narratives. That I can actually immediately forward to you 100 instances of wrongful arrest and censorship.
Given the kind of, therefore, polarized debate in a way, Shashi Shekhar, let me give you a final word, because Mr. Vempati, we heard Sainath suggest that India has a serious problem when it comes to authoritarianism, both at the state level, I repeat, and at the center, of dealing with the media at times. Do you believe that this documentary, in a way, and the reaction of the government only exemplifies that no government wants to in any way be subject to critical scrutiny anymore?
No, I don't agree with that characterization at all, because I think in India we have a very vibrant democracy, very vibrant media sector. For every pro-government argument, there are hundreds of arguments counter to it, and you see that every day in social media, on digital media, and so on. So I don't quite buy that argument. As far as the indices are concerned, there are serious questions on their methodology, the manner in which they recruit country experts, and there's a whole lot of need for transparency in many of these indices that seem to put India below Afghanistan, for example, on certain things like academic freedom and so on. right? So I would agree with what Sainath is saying. Also, to the larger question that is this exemplifying authoritarianism? No, not at all. I think it's a very meaningful step that the government has taken, because this was copyrighted content. It was illegally uploaded, and it was jeopardizing India's relationships with the United Kingdom. And I think clearly from that standpoint, it made sense for the government to act on this. Also, I think it also puts the spotlight on the BBC's editorial bias, its editorial agenda. And I think there needs to be focus on this within the UK itself. On what future do they envisage for their public broadcaster, because their public broadcaster is jeopardizing their country's relations with the world's largest democracy.
Shruti Kapila, you're smiling as you're listening to Mr. Vempati. You believe this will have no effect on Indo-UK relations?
I just think it's a bit laughable, because I do think that the BBC has proven itself to be independent in this reportage precisely because it has been beleaguered for the last 10, 12 years under the Tory government. And as far as the FTA is concerned, there's a kind of massive competitive neo-nationalism going on. If there has been all this kind of ruckus today about this documentary, you've had Kenny, one of the ministers, cabinet ministers, saying yesterday itself that the country doesn't believe in free movement of people. So it is not even going to restore student visa levels back to where they were, say, about 8 years ago. So I don't think, this whole problem of neo-nationalist authoritarian populism is that, this is not a contest that only belongs to one political party in the world's largest democracy. If others start stepping onto the scene, you're going to see a fraying of nerves so therefore I don't think this is really about just the FTA or law and order. I think this is image politics. It is image politics of Prime Minister Modi, but also of India at large. And I think that is what we should be considering rather than debating all the other things here.
Okay, let's leave it there. We've heard a multiplicity of voices, which is the aim here on the news today. Let's take a break on this point. On the other side, after we've heard all these voices, we'll turn to our newsmaker of the day. Justice R.S. Sodhi claims that the Supreme Court, no less, is betraying the constitution of the country. What does he exactly mean? He'll join us on the other side.
Men and women who built Indian industry, and the young guns who are shaping tomorrow's India. From storied careers to unicorn dreams.
The equity market is a dynamic space that needs sharper insights and perfect timing. What stock, what fund, what to pick and what to sell.
How do you make money on the markets? And what are the superior strategies for a winning portfolio?
Your questions answered by 30 years
of undisputed leadership.
Only at the Market Today Summit.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
Welcome back. No end, I'm afraid, to the tug-of-war that's brewing between the government and the highest judiciary. Today, while speaking at an event at the 30 Hazari Court Complex, Law Minister Kiran Rijiju pointed out that judges do not have to contest elections or face public scrutiny, reminding the audience that with the advent of social media, the people now have the power to speak. Listen in to what he said.
जज तो एक बार जज बन गए तो उनको तो चुनाव का सामना तो करना नहीं है। जजों का तो ऐसा है कि उसको पब्लिक स्क्रूटनी भी नहीं कर सकते हैं। तो इसलिए मैंने कहा कि जितने जो जजेस होते हैं, आप जनता आपको नहीं चुनते हैं, इसलिए जनता आपको बदल नहीं सकते हैं, लेकिन आपको जनता देख रहा है। आपका जो जजमेंट है, जजों का काम करने का जो तरीका है, किस तरीके से आप न्याय देते हैं, लोग देख रहे हैं।
Joining me now is my newsmaker today, Justice R.S. Sodhi, former Justice at the Delhi High Court, who's also joined in this debate. Because you are making all the headlines this morning in the papers, Justice Sodhi, when you said that the Supreme Court has hijacked the constitution of the country. What exactly did you mean, Justice Sodhi, by saying that?
Well, what I mean to say when I say the Supreme Court has hijacked the constitution is that the constitution has been interpreted in a manner that the constitution cannot be interpreted. The constitution provides for appointment of judges in a particular fashion and does not give collegium an opportunity to keep appointing themselves. That's why I said you have hijacked the constitution.
But what you're suggesting then, Justice Sodhi, is that the judges are misusing the collegium system for appointing judges, but this system has existed from 1993. Why suddenly in 2023 wake up and say that? Because, that will lead to people, raising questions. Why now?
I did not say they are hijacking the entire constitution. I just said that they had hijacked the constitution, which was functioning till 1992 very well, as far as the appointment of the judiciary is concerned. But all of a sudden they need to change it to make themselves, appoint themselves. That is hijacking.
No, but what you are saying, Justice Sodhi, is that in 2023, 30 years after the collegium system has been in place, now when Kiran Rijiju, the law minister, and other government functionaries are questioning the manner of the functioning of judiciary, you also join in the debate. Are you batting for the Modi government?
I am not batting for anybody. This interview I gave on the 8th or 9th of January. I did not know what the law minister was doing or is going to use it or not use it. Mine was an innocent answer to a question asked by me by a journalist, and that is it. I had no other political motive to it. But if you can use it, what can I do about it?
You're saying there were no political motives to your question, but let's get it specific. Are you saying, therefore, that the Indian judiciary needs to move away from the collegium system where 5 judges appoint High Court judges and 3 judges, or vice versa, 5 Supreme Court judges appoint fellow judges as well as High Court judges?
See, I think the collegium system has outlived its utility and is now decaying. The decay has to be stopped, and we can do that by overhauling our system. After all, we do want the judiciary to function appropriately, and we also want appointments to be made transparently and with some guideline and system to be there, not ad hocism and knee-jerk reactions.
But what suddenly has changed for you to say all this? Is there something specific that has happened for you to feel that the judiciary has lost its way?
I don't want to get into that part. Yes, lots of things have happened and lots of things are happening. But the way it has moved, the system is moving now, I think it is moving in the wrong direction, and therefore it was time for me to speak up. But I am not going to name any judges, I am not going to name anybody, and therefore it is pointless asking me these questions again and again.
I'm not asking you, Justice Sodhi, to name specific judges. I am asking you to be specific with our audience today. What is wrong in the current system for a judge like you to say the judiciary has hijacked the constitution? What is that has made you feel so angry to say that?
All right. What I notice is that the Supreme Court judge, who is appointed from a particular high court, runs his agenda of forcing the Chief Justice of that court to send names which he wants to be sent. And that is why the high courts are becoming absolutely spineless, because they are looking up at the Supreme Court for their appointments to the Supreme Court, for their appointment, for their transfers, and the like. Therefore, I felt that it is an impropriety, and that appropriate selection is not taking place, but it is going on in a nature that would be harmful to the judiciary.
You know, the flip side to what you are saying, Justice Sodhi, is, are you looking for the government to intervene? Will we now have a situation where the government will virtually decide or have their say or final say in the appointment of judges in this country?
No, I do not say that the government should appoint or have a say per se. But what I say is that the independence of the High Court should also be taken into consideration. The High Courts are today no longer independent. And please tell me, how come 3 judges of the High Court who form the collegium can become so wise as to choose names from a pool that is just not there? And what about the other judges of the High Court? Are they irrelevant? Where is their say? So the system has to change itself. This collegium system of 4 and 5 or 2 or 3s having their way is bad.
No, sir, no one is saying systems don't need to be reformed, but you're saying all this at a time when the law minister is seen to be taking pot shots at the judiciary, the government is seen to be sitting on appointments of judges, the government is seen to want only convenient judges. Which is a better system at the end of the day? One which has government intervention, or one which is the present system, which, as you rightly said, may be opaque, but at least doesn't have government interference on a daily basis?
I do not support the fighting of the infighting going on between the Supreme Court and the law minister and such. I do not support it at all. And on the contrary, I think it's most unsavory that two responsible limbs of the Constitution should be battering it out on the streets like this. It does not behove the Supreme Court nor the executive or the Parliament. It has to be sorted out in a rational manner, but at the same time, the collegium, the way of the 5 or the way of the 3 the will of the 5 or the will of the 3 has to stop, and there has to be a broader way, and we must know who is being appointed, why is he being appointed, or what is the criteria of appointment. There is absolutely nothing. It's just your will, and if you just keep on importing your will into everything, and that was a will of 3 for a High Court judge, will of 5 for a Supreme Court judge, is that feasible?
Let me leave it there, Justice Sodhi. You've set the cat among the pigeons once again with your remarks. This is a debate that is going to carry on. What it does, though, to the independence of the judiciary, or indeed the future of the judiciary, we'll leave it to all you mighty judges and jurists to decide. Thanks very much for joining me. Let me leave you, though, tonight with a happier image. Atiya Shetty, the daughter of Bollywood actor Sunil Shetty and Indian cricketer KL Rahul, marrying today in a private ceremony at the Shetty home in Khandala. The newlyweds have shared pictures of their wedding. We wish them well. We wish KL Rahul runs against Australia as well, and hope that they have plenty of happiness. That's a good news image to end on. You stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.
Congratulations! Congratulations!
Snakes in the backyard sting Pakistan. After economic crisis, Islamabad faces security challenges. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan's return to acts of terror, extortion and hostage-taking is turning the clock back for Pakistan by a decade. On 2nd January, there was an angry exchange of words, indicative of how placing Taliban in power in Kabul has gone wrong for those at the wheel in Pakistan. Pakistan's Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah spoke about attacking Tehreek-e-Taliban hideouts in Afghanistan. In reaction, Ahmad Yasir, a Taliban leader, put out an image of Pakistan's defeat at India's hands in 1971, warning Islamabad of a repeat if Pakistan attacks Afghanistan. Pakistan Defence Minister has alleged that Afghanistan's soil is being used by armed groups to launch attacks, triggering a sharp response from the Taliban government who called the charge incorrect. The Tehreek-e-Taliban has issued threats to the Shehbaz Sharif government, accusing it working for the Americans. It has asked PM Shehbaz Sharif and Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto to review their policy against them. Ever since the Taliban got a hold on Afghanistan, Pakistan has witnessed a sharp rise in terrorism incidents. TTP was involved in 2007 assassination of Benazir Bhutto, 2009 attack on Pakistan Army headquarters, 2008 bombing Marriott Hotel in Islamabad, 2012 attack on Nobel laureate Malaya Yousafzai, 2014 attack on Peshawar school. Pakistan, which nurtured the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan to use it as proxy force in Afghanistan and India, is now getting a taste of its own medicine. Bureau Report, India Today.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com.
Amazon, the company that delivers packages at your doorstep, could soon be seen delivering you the electricity. In order to trade clean energy in India, Amazon has established a new energy company called AEI New Energy Trading Private Limited that works with Indian energy producing firms. While the US-based company will utilize the energy to power its own operations, there's a chance it may also power your home. The largest corporate consumer of clean energy in the world holds a Category 3 trade license in India.